You know, we focus on getting the garden in the spring and all these different things, but there's one thing that you absolutely have to do first thing in the spring. The last few years, preserving supplies have gotten really scarce, especially around harvest time. And so there's one thing that I love doing early in the spring, and that's going through all of my preserving supplies and buying everything that I need for the year so I can be sure to have them on hand when the produce starts rolling in and I'm ready to use them. So let's go do that. This is really important to do this time of year because that gives you enough time to find the supplies that are missing or that are hard to get. So let's go through the things that I check really every single spring and make sure I have on hand. The absolute first thing is to make sure that I have all the canning lids that I need. I love getting these big sleeves of canning lids from Lehman's. I'll put a link below for you guys. I get several of these every single year in both different sizes, and I really like them, but they have been really hard to get the last few years, so sometimes they're out of stock. The other company that I really like, I go to all the time, and their lids have been really, really solid. I haven't had any failures with them, and that is the Denali Canning Company. I can give you guys a special coupon code for these, so look down in the description. The other thing that I keep an eye on is my canning jar supplies. You know, every so many years, as we increase the amount of food that we need to preserve for our family, because our family's growing and eating more every year, I need to get a few more jars. So I try to look around, take stock of what sizes I need the most, and put that on a list so I can always be looking for when they're available, or if they're readily available, when they go on sale. Make sure you have a jar lifter. I always have a backup one on hand, so if you don't have a backup one, make sure you get one. It's a pain to try to get jars out without one of them, and a good funnel. But there's a few ingredients that I really think are important to have on hand. If you do any sort of jams or jellies or anything like that, you'll really want to stock up on pectin. I love using the Pomona's Universal Pectin, and I buy it bulk. One of the great things about it is it lasts forever on your shelf, so it'll really sit there. You can buy a big bulk package. You save money over those little packages, and it'll just sit there for as long as you do it. So if it takes you 3-4 years to use it, that's fine. It'll just sit there waiting for you. I love the Pomona's Pectin because you can use low sugar and no sugar applications for it, unlike a lot of other pectins, and it uses all non-GMO ingredients. So I really, really like that. And then you need your instant gel, or whatever you're gonna use if you're gonna make pie fillings or thickened fillings of any sort that you're going to can. I love using the Cornabee's Thick Gel. I really like this because it is all non-GMO. You can't use regular cornstarch for canning. You have to use a modified food starch, but at least this modified food starch comes from non-GMO sources. So I think this is a really, really great product to have. When you're getting started, if you are pressure canning and you're using a pressure canner that has any sort of rubberized parts like this, make sure you check them over, and if they're starting to crack or anything, make sure you replace them, or at least you get the replacement parts on hand. You can often find these parts at a hardware store. If you have a really good hardware store local to you that carries this sort of thing, they're often available there. If not, you can find them online. Other things that I make sure I have on hand for my canning year, I always buy a 5-gallon bucket of pasteurized apple cider vinegar. I like buying it bulk. I usually get it through Azure Standard, so I'll give you the link below. Pasteurized is important when it comes to canning and pickling because you need a standardized pH. If you have a raw vinegar, I know we all heard about the health benefits of that raw vinegar, which is very true, but if you're going to can with it, you're going to be pasteurizing it anyways. And the important thing is that you know exactly what the pH is when you start with it. So you want that standardized, pasteurized vinegar in order to properly pickle vegetables and make sure that they stay really safe. So get yourself a big old batch of that. Again, like I said, I like getting it by the 5-gallon bucket in our house, so I always have some on hand. The other things that I like to buy in bulk, mustard seed and whole black pepper. If I didn't grow my own dill, then I would also buy that in bulk, but I usually have that going in the garden when it's time to pickle things. So make sure you have all of those types of ingredients that you're gonna have to use for your pickling or for any other water bath canning or for any canning for that matter. Make sure you have them on hand. Just go ahead and buy them in bulk so you can save some money. Let's talk about dehydrating. When it comes to dehydrating, the only ingredient that I tend to buy bulk and that's special is just the pectin for making fruit leathers, but I also use that same Pomona's fruit pectin. I do, however, though, really like to check over my trays and make sure I have all the different pieces for the trays and that they're in really good shape. So I like to check that I've got all of these netting trays. These are from my Excalibur dehydrator, which I absolutely love. I like to make sure I have these basic fabric trays. These are kind of the non-stick, like the replacement for parchment paper. I use these constantly, so I want to make sure that they're in good shape, and sometimes you do need to replace them, so just keep an eye out for those. And then I always check over these. Now these have lasted me really, really well. I've never had to replace them, but I use these all season long, and these are these silicone mats that have the little bit of the rim all the way around them. This just allows you to make the easiest ever fruit leather. You can just like dump it on there, smooth it out, and the rim makes sure that the edges are nice and thick, which if you've ever made fruit leather, you'll know that it's really easy to get the edges really thin and the middle really thick. So this just helps make it really smooth and really even. So I love, love, love these things. This company also actually has a whole bunch of other shapes that you can get built into their silicone mats that fit just for the Excalibur and for different types of dehydrators. I've never played with the other ones, but I'm kind of looking forward to maybe getting some and trying them out. Sounds like it could be a lot of fun. That's pretty much what I grab for the dehydrator. Now, when it comes to the freeze dryer, I always make sure that I have some freeze dryer oil on hand. Now, you need the special oil for your particular pump, so just read your freeze dryer label, make sure you have whatever you need for that. Also, check out this brand new oil filter from Harvest Right. I'm excited about this because this is a nice way to filter out your oil so you can reuse it. So you may want to consider getting one of these. There's also DIY options for this. You can make your own, but this isn't very expensive and it's really nice to use with the little flippy top. So I'm really excited to have this. When it comes to freeze drying, make sure you also have a good supply of however you're going to store your freeze dried and really your dehydrated foods. If you use the MYLAR bags, make sure you have a steady supply of those on hand. If you use the oxygen absorbers, get a lot of those. Now, what I tend to use are mason jars. You can see right here, I love storing my freeze-dried foods in mason jars, and then I use my vacuum sealer with the jar attachment on it to suck all of the extra oxygen out of there. This just goes right on the top and it seals it right on down, so you don't have to keep purchasing oxygen absorbers or MYLAR bags. The downside of this is this much food in jars takes up a lot of storage space, and of course it's heavy and can break. The MYLAR bags do have some fun benefits. However, for these, I love it that I can see into them. It makes it so much easier just to grab it and use it. If I was trying to fill a prepper pantry that I was just gonna stash away for 20 years in case of an emergency, then I'd probably go with the MYLAR bags. But for everyday use, where I'm just preserving the garden harvest and using it all winter long, I really, really prefer going with any size of the mason jars. Another really neat trick that I have learned with freeze drying is that if you're freeze drying your garden produce and you're actually using it all year to eat off of, you can store it bulk. Now, this is not great for long-term storage because getting in and out of it has a tendency to introduce too much moisture. Look at this corn that I freeze dried last year right out of the garden. It is in great shape. It is completely dry still. Now, my trick here is that I've got about 3 of the 5-gallon bucket size oxygen absorbers sitting down in the bottom of this bucket. That way it gives me a little bit of flexibility when I get in and out of it. I have some time, and when I store it back down, it will continue to suck out that oxygen because I've got more capacity for oxygen in those absorbers than I actually need in this bucket. This has been a great way to go. It's in one of these Gamma Seal buckets, so it's airtight, watertight, insect tight, all those different things, and it can go ahead and lock down. And I'm really, really enjoying this. That way I don't have to do a whole bunch of little jars for something we're gonna get in and out of for small amounts all winter. So you may wanna check this out. You can also do one of the 2-gallon Gamma Seal bucket size for something that's even smaller, but really easy to still get into. Let's cover some of the other things I make sure that I have on hand for the preserving year. One of them is oil. I love having oil on hand because I do preserve some things in oil. I make flavored oils. I do all sorts of good things with oil. So I want to make sure that I have this in hand before I go into the preserving season, and I want to just be able to make up a quick batch of a flavored oil. This is an olive oil that I love getting from Azure Standard because they test every single batch, so they make sure that this is actually 100% pure olive oil, unlike what you get at the grocery store. Some of the other things I like to buy in bulk are vodka for making tinctures or making liqueurs. If you do that, make sure you just have that on hand before you go into the season. If you do jams and jellies, make sure you get extra sugar on hand or whatever sweetener you're gonna use for that. I like to just make sure I've got a couple of bags of that on hand all the time. That way I can really quickly make up a batch of jam or jelly. A lot of times somebody will swing by and have a whole bunch of extra fruit for me that they don't want to turn into something, and they'll drop it off. So I have to make sure I have the ingredients on hand so I can use them right away. Also, make sure you have really good quality salt on hand. It can be whatever you're going to use for canning or fermenting. Personally, I just like to use a regular, good quality cooking salt, like Redmond real salt or a Himalayan salt, something that has some minerals in it and it's really good. You can use that for canning, for fermenting, and for pretty much everything else when it comes to preserving food. So go ahead and stock up on that. You should always have at least 50 pounds of that on hand to do whatever it is that you need to do during the preserving year and for just basic seasoning and cooking with. You guys, if you want to make the best pickles ever that stay super crunchy even when you can them, check out this video right here.